Welcome back. It is time once again to talk about the Rangers. Yes, I want to talk about their last 10 games. I want to talk a bit about Chris Drury as well, and just get into production and these kinds of things and some of the uncomfortable conversations around the New York Rangers right now that are being had. So the losing started in Calgary. And this was noteworthy because this was coming off of a win the Rangers had against Vancouver, where they looked very composed, very together, and very much like a contending team. And then the crash started. So it starts with a loss against Calgary 3-2. Well, the Flames are very good at home. It was a tied game after two. No reason to be worried there. Then in Edmonton, they lost 6-2. They trailed 4-0 in the second period. Again, teams go through this kind of thing. It happens. It's not necessarily a big deal. However, they came home and lost against St. Louis 5-2. Now, that game was tied after two. One thing to keep in mind is that an old, I want to say trope around the NHL, and people could say it's cliche, I guess, as well, is that after you come home off of a long road trip, you can have a letdown that first game back. And that's kind of how that felt the game against St. Louis. But this is right around where we started hearing rumblings that the New York Rangers want to make major changes. And this became known because they let everybody know. And I'll come back to that, but I don't think it helped. I don't think it did. Again, that's something we'll talk about during this video here. So then they go to Carolina and they lose 4-3. They led that game 3-2 after two. It's a close game. And they lose that one 4-3. Then they lost in Philadelphia 3-1, and they were trailing 3-0 after two. That's where things are getting really troubling. You can explain away these four games. Again, Calgary very good at home. Edmonton at the end of a long road trip. St. Louis, again, that cliche of it's the first game home after a long road trip. Carolina's a very good team, but Philadelphia, that's a game they should win, right? Then, at home, they win against the Montreal Canadiens 4-3. But the game-winning goal against Montreal didn't happen until 1936 of the third period. So, when Kakko scores that game-winning goal, it ends the losing. And the word at the time via Elliot Friedman was that lowered the pressure a little bit with the New York Rangers. And this was where the storyline for me became kind of bewildering. Beating Montreal lowered the pressure, but it's Montreal. They're one of they're at the bottom of the East, so should that really change anything? To me, it shouldn't. To me, if a team is fundamentally flawed, winning a game shouldn't change anything, right? So then, still at home, they lose 5-1 against the New Jersey Devils. They trailed that one 2-0 after the first. Then, again at home, they beat Pittsburgh 4-2. They led that one 2-1 after two periods of play, meaning they'd won 2 out of 3 at home, though beating Pittsburgh and Montreal, both teams below the playoff line. Those are games that they should be expected to win if they're going to be like Stanley Cup contenders. Then there's the loss against Seattle. They lost that one 7-5. They led that one 3-1 in the second period. Last night, they lose at home against Chicago 2-1. That one was tied 1-1 after one. Something with this team just feels off now. And I would not have said that after that win over Vancouver, which was right before all the losing gets started. Something, it feels like, has shifted over these last 10 games. So looking over those last 10 games, Artemi Panarin, 5 goals, 5 assists. He is a -5. Cooley, 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points. Will Cooley, arguably their MVP so far this season. Trocheck, 4 goals, 3 assists, 7 points over this stretch of games. So that's not bad, comparatively speaking, with others. Adam Fox, 7 assists. Adam Fox still doesn't have a goal this year. Lafreniere, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points. He's been a -6 over those 10 games. And Zibanejad, a goal and 5 assists for 6 points. He's a -10 over these 10 games. I do think Zibanejad's very likely on the trade block. I don't know that you'd find takers for Zibanejad, but Trouba's contract got traded, so it's always possible. Smith, 9 games, 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points for Riley Smith over that time period. Kaapo Kakko, a goal and 2 assists for 3 points. He's reportedly on the trade block. which doesn't seem to be helping his offensive play. But we've talked about Capo Caco for years and waiting for that breakthrough to the point where I'd given up on that breakthrough coming through and sort of resigned myself to the idea that he's probably a bottom six forward throughout his career, but he could carve out a pretty good niche there, right? Now, Shesterkin's been 1-6 during this run, and for all of the stuff I see getting thrown at him, he has a 908 save percentage. No, it's not fantastic. It's still above league average. League average is still running around 900, so that 908 is pretty good, considering the team in front of him's been pretty not good. Jonathan Quick, 1-2 with an 831 save percentage. So, I'm going to come out and say it's not the goaltending. It's not the goaltending that's been the problem here. Quick's numbers are ugly after that loss against Seattle, which I explained after that loss against Seattle. I really felt like that was a defensive miscue after defensive miscue. And the alarming part being that the effort isn't there in the defensive zone. When you watch these replays, they're not getting sticks in lanes. They're not blocking shots. They're not taking the guy in front of the net. So goaltenders, Shesterkin and Quick, are facing prime chances right in front of the net often. So maybe they're not allowing as many shots because they don't have to. If you're getting those shots from the inner slot and you're able to just tee off, you're going to get goals on fewer shots. So they've been outscored 40-25 during this 10-game period. It's not great. Their power play and their penalty kill, though, have both been okay. Their power play 19.2%, their penalty kill 80.7%. You add those two numbers together, it's almost 100. 5-on-5 play is really hurting this team. And 5-on-5 play has been talked about for a long time around the New York Rangers. That they're power play merchants, that this team isn't built to win come playoff time because the power play is going to fall by the wayside. You're not going to get as many opportunities. And so it's going to come down to 5-on-5 play, and that's where this team struggles. And that has been said year after year around this team. It was said a lot last year, but they were winning, and they were getting their special teams production, and they were getting really good goaltending, so they were able to cover up their issues 5-on-5. Now they're not able to cover up their issues 5-on-5. Seems to be the problem. Now, between now and Christmas, their schedule, I would say it's not that daunting of a schedule, but I don't know that this is that daunting of a schedule either, and yet they've lost games against teams below the playoff line. Calgary's technically below the playoff line right now. St. Louis, Philadelphia, Seattle, and Chicago. So, all teams below the playoff line that they've lost to. Now, on Wednesday, so tomorrow, they're in Buffalo. That'll be a fascinating matchup, won't it? Angry Ranger fans might make the trek to Buffalo. I don't know that they necessarily do, but I'm sure there will be some Ranger jerseys in attendance. It could be an interesting setup since both fan bases aren't very happy right now. Then on Saturday, they're at home against LA. Now, LA isn't as good on the road as they are at home, but they're still 500 on the road. They're still dangerous on the road, so that'll be interesting. Then they're on the road on Sunday in St. Louis. They've already shown that they can lose against St. Louis. Will they show us they can beat St. Louis on Sunday? Then on Tuesday the 17th, they're in Nashville. Can they beat Nashville? In Nashville? Nashville's below 500 at home, but the Rangers have struggled. Then they're in Dallas on Friday the 20th. We know that with Dallas, they're fantastic at home and mediocre on the road. But at least here, you get an extra day off in between. Maybe they're able to work some extra drills. Maybe they're able to have a practice where they can work on stuff. The problem being that extra day off isn't until after their next 4 games are done. So, yeah, although they have an extra day off in between Buffalo and LA as well. Those days for practice are really important, and they're hard to find during the regular season. It is a very cramped schedule. And then they're at home on Sunday the 22nd against Carolina. They finish things off the next day in New Jersey against the Devils. So, Dallas, Carolina, New Jersey, they'd better make their points in these next 4 games, or we might be talking about a New York Rangers team that's below the playoff line. So, Chris Drury, general manager since May the 5th of 2021. Chris Drury has done some stuff over the last 6 months, which from a general manager's perspective, is genius. He hasn't done anything wrong. He hasn't violated the CBA. Although I've started seeing articles stating that players are considering changing the CBA because he's exposed an issue with no trade clauses. So Barclay Goodrow has a no trade clause, and he says he's not going to San Jose. It's one of those modified no trade, certain teams on it. San Jose's on the list. So Chris Drury puts him on waivers, and San Jose claims him. He ends up going to the team that was on his no trade list. Jacob Trouba doesn't want to go anywhere and is told, you either get traded or we're going to put you on waivers, and you're going to end up probably going to Columbus where you don't want to go. And so he takes the trade to Anaheim. He and his wife and his agent discuss this, and they decide Anaheim's the best destination. So Trouba gets traded when he had trade protection. There are players now saying this shouldn't be happening. You shouldn't be able to waive a player and have them go to a team who is on their no-trade list. So that's something to look for the next collective bargaining agreement, courtesy of Chris Drury. Because teams are seeing this and going, right? There has to be a team somewhere in the NHL looking at that and going, I think maybe we could try something like that. Because all it takes is one team to do it and show that it works. And there's another team somewhere sitting with somebody who's got trade protection that they'd really like to get rid of. Maybe that'll work. So, yeah, the NHLPA, I would expect, will have their discussions on this, and we'll see if teams are able to continue to expose this loophole, which Chris Drury has used to jettison both Goodrow and Trouba. And then you get into the weeds on this, too, because I know there's a lot of Ranger fans that are happy about Trouba being traded. I understand that getting that extra cap space and moving out a player who a lot of fans were wanting to see go anyways, great. But it does get a little bit tricky from here because this was the team captain. This was a guy who other players on that team looked up to, and it does make me wonder, so how many teams playing for the Rangers right now feel kind of, I don't know, dispirited watching what's gone on to two of their teammates in the last 6 months? To guys who had this trade protection, and Chris Drury's like, trade protection? Oh, we can get around the trade protection. And so for other players on this team, guys who even have trade protection, you might get a little bit nervous. And when you're already not playing well now you got another distraction on top of the fact that you're not playing well, it gets more difficult to get out of it. So Peter Laviolette, as a coach, has a very difficult job right now. Because I'm sure that he's got to tell these guys, hey, just tune out the noise in the background. And if you're a player on this team, it'd be tempting to point at the GM's office and go talk to him. He's getting all the noise going. Because it was 2 weeks ago that he sent out a memo to all 31 teams saying, hey, guys like Kreider, Trouba, these guys are available. Give me a call. And it got out. Because of course it did. Got out right away. And now you've got a battle brewing between the Ottawa Senators and the New York Rangers over Brady Tkachuk's name suddenly ending up out there. And the Senators saying, we have no interest in trading Brady Tkachuk, and they're saying that it's tampering. And tampering, so for anybody who may not be aware, as a general manager, you can't come out publicly and say, I would really like to trade for Adam Fox. Adam Fox is a really good defenseman. I'd really like to add him to my lineup. That's considered tampering. You can't do that. So if Chris Drury was even just saying out loud, we'd really like to get Brady Tkachuk, that's considered tampering. So the Rangers are denying it was said. And now it gets into he said, and who knows where that goes, right? Who knows if the Ottawa Senators, they could file a complaint, and then the NHL would have to look into it. The NHL would probably be a, slap on the wrist, but who knows? So for Drury, the job that he's done, you might see him as being a genius for being able to move Trouba. Sure. But you might also look at it and say, he did that. The way he did it, though, because basically he sat down the team captain and said, look, you're gone. And if you don't accept the trade, I'm just going to throw you on waivers and you go wherever the wind blows. So it's up to you. But either way, you're out of here. You're done. Because if you're a player on this team, you may very well think, am I next? Am I next to get sat down in the office? And it's not a great motivator. It's not going to make them put on a Rangers jersey and say, I'm really glad I'm a Ranger today. Let's get out there and get at it. And that's how people should feel when they're going out there to play. They should be excited. I know when I'm watching games and they show the little pregame and there's guys in the hallway and they're high fiving each other and they're really riling each other up. I like that. And there's teams where you don't see that as much. The camaraderie that we saw with the Rangers last year when they were on their way to a great regular season, you don't really see that this year. And the body language from this team, like they just don't have it. Once Seattle started that comeback in that game at home, where they had the 3-1 lead, they just didn't have an answer. Chicago, they didn't have an answer for Chicago for a full 60 minutes last night. They were a step slower. Chicago was outworking them at home in a game they desperately needed to win while they're staring down the barrel of losing their 8th out of 10. And it just wasn't there. The push you look for in the third period from a team that's desperate for a win wasn't there. So they've gone from a team that's playing pretty well and losing some games here and there, and maybe having an off night here and there too, sure. Now it's disinterested. It feels like they're a worse team now than they were before the Trouba trade, which I'm sure was not the intention of the Trouba trade, which now means it's like, all right, so trade other players. And I've seen the articles on that too of, well, Trouba's gone, so now you got to trade other guys. I really think they're overcorrecting a problem here. Again, they're not good 5-on-5. Their special teams have covered up for that. Their goaltending's covered up for that. But the kind of moves that I'm starting to see talks about basically change this team entirely, and we could see them back out of the playoffs. We could see a situation where this is a team that's no longer really in contention for said playoffs. There are some good teams below the playoff line, and the New York Rangers could end up being one of those teams. So the defense is really fallen apart. They're tied for 15th in goals against in the National Hockey League, but expected goals against they're 28th, which means they're allowing a lot of high danger chances. A lot of those shots are in close, and the defense just is not good enough. So they've gone from a defense last year that was probably around middle of the pack in terms of the expected goals against to one that's just awful. And continually, you're watching as teams just skate right through the defense and score. And I felt bad for both Igor and Jonathan Quick watching them having to deal with this, thinking to myself, the stats are going to be ugly for the goaltender, but what in the hell were they supposed to do on that shot? There's no way that should happen. These players shouldn't be getting to the net uncontested. So is it a coaching problem? Is the problem on the defense? So do you change one player on the defense or two or three? And then when you trade players, well, then you got to worry about the chemistry of the players you're bringing in and whether or not they're going to fit with the other guys. And you're going through basically that feeling out process we see with teams in October when the season gets started. And they would be doing this in December, maybe January, if some big changes come in after Christmas. And that can lead to more losses and more struggles as players are getting used to each other. Even when a goaltender's traded for, it takes a little while sometimes for the defense to get used to the way the goaltender comes out and plays the puck or doesn't. Or goaltenders learning which defensemen come back and what the defensemen do and getting that kind of ability to read when to make certain moves and when not to. So I don't know that there's a quick fix here. And I do feel like the memo was probably a bad idea. They did damage control right away after. They sat down and talked to Kreider. They sat down and talked to Trouba, who's now gone. So I'm sure if you're Chris Kreider, you had a meeting. Trouba had a meeting. Well, now Trouba's gone. So you're probably looking over your shoulder and going, so when am I out of here? Because there are still plenty of rumors about Kreider possibly being moved, and soon. So just with the look of everything, I don't know how you fix this. And this is going to have to influence players' opinions on New York and whether or not they would necessarily want to go there. Because I always say this is true. Hockey players talk to one another And I guarantee you that right now in Anaheim, Trouba's giving his new teammates an earful on stuff that happened in New York. And that information then those Ducks players could pass on to other NHLers. Before you know it, players being approached by a GM with, well, we're thinking about trading you. You can give us 5 teams you don't want to go to. And he's like, New York Rangers. So that's the problem. Is if this is viewed as a team that will throw its players under the bus, and that's essentially what's kind of happened here, it can be more difficult then to attract new players to come in and play. While you've already got the players who are there, clearly not being mentally in it. And last night they just looked really disengaged. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below regarding the New York Rangers. How do you fix this? Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for watching. I still think this Rangers team is talented enough to win. I just don't know how you fix this now. Winning 2 of their last 10. They're sliding towards missing the playoffs. I don't know how you fix this now that snowball's rolling downhill. It's got enough steam right now. I don't know how far it goes before it hits bottom and then they start climbing again. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. I will talk to you guys again soon.